The Toronto Raptors are taking a serious look at multiple very interesting international prospects in this year's NBA draft. Of course, where the Raptors have the number 9 overall selection, a lot of eyes have been on players that are expected to be drafted in that range. However, Masai Ujiri has done his due diligence and is very interested in making sure he gets the maximum value for this team, whether he has to trade for a pick, make some moves, or select these guys with the number 39 overall selection. And there are a lot of guys that Masai Ujiri, the Raptors, have worked out, have taken a look at very, very closely, and a couple of the names are very intriguing. So we're going to take a look at a couple of those names out here in this video and break down the fit that they could have for the Toronto Raptors moving forward. So lots of stuff to break down in this video, but folks, you guys have been crushing it. Hit that subscribe button as of late, very close to 38,000 subscribers. So if you're part of the 47% that haven't hit the sub button just yet, and you want to stay up to date with all of the latest Toronto Raptors news as we inch closer and closer to this year's NBA draft, make sure you guys hit that subscribe button. But let's jump into it because, of course, all eyes have really been on the number 9 pick, whether or not the Raptors are going to get Kevin Durant, and all that type of stuff that has been popping off in Raptors land over the past couple of weeks. But the NBA draft is where Masai Ujiri's really made his mark out there across the NBA in terms of finding diamonds in the rough, coming out and be able to just bring in players with extremely high value, whether it's a second round pick, an undrafted guy, and there are some workouts that are very intriguing to Toronto Raptors fans, and one guy specifically that I just flashed his picture, but Hansen is a guy that, frankly, at the number 39 overall selection, which is the Toronto Raptors second round pick this year, that they acquired from the Portland Trail Blazers, could be a very intriguing option, as right now he's projected to go 35 overall in the most recent ESPN mock draft. I've seen him in scanning through the mock drafts for prepping this video, around the 40 range, 35. Some people have him jump into the first round according to some stouts. So outside the top 5, the top 10 especially, it's very hard to pinpoint where players will end up getting selected. So Hansen is a guy that is very intriguing in terms of how he can impact the basketball court. So let's take a look at who he is as a basketball player. So essentially, he's a 7. So I've seen him listed between 7'1", 7'3". The NBA. So I'll throw it at 7'2". Basically, what NBA Takeathon has him listed at here right now. 7'2" with a 7'2" wingspan, 250 pounds, just 19 years old. Will be close to 20 when he's drafted. So he's mocked here at number 40 overall. But a very just exciting prospect that a lot of people are intrigued by his upside. So we take a look at it. Of course, he's not, jumping out the gym out there at that center position, but he is a guy that, last season in terms of, his 20, 24, 20, 25 per game averages, playing international basketball, he is a dude that really could fill the stat sheet, averaging 16 points per game, 2.7 blocks, 3 assists, and 10 rebounds per night. He's a solid free throw shooter. Not great, but 67%, but not horrible out there. He has taken 3-point shots, so he took 1.1 threes per game, which at 28% isn't elite by any stretch of the imagination, but shows that is an area of his game where he can certainly develop, but is a guy that really, as a second round pick, has extremely high upside. He has a 9'3" reach at the center spot, and really just has a lot of people excited in terms of like his actual ball sense. So if we look at his strengths, he's a really polished scorer. Like, he has that ability to finish around the basket, that touch around the rim. He can really just finish at the net and, get the ball inside and have the soft shot. It's the same way Jakob Poeltl does. You're not dunking on people every single time, but you're in that post, you can finish around the basket. He's a great passer as well, which, you're seeing more and more from these international big men. Of course, Nikola Jokic is the, poster boy of this sort of, style play, but he's a guy that can run that mid post the same way Marc Gasol did for the Toronto Raptors during those, during the championship run the year after, right? Playing the mid post and facilitate out there at that position. And Jakob Poeltl's really developed in that area as well. So to have a guy off the bench in Yang could really be a very a nice positive for this team. He's a strong interior presence and rebounder. Like, he gets boards, he blocks shots despite not being super, jumping out the gym by any stretch of the imagination. And, when he's playing in those short rolls, he can catch the basketball and make the right decision. And that's exactly what you want to see, because if you have a big man that is a good passer or is willing to make those moves, willing to make those passes, generally those big men, when they come to the NBA at a higher level, they, decision making gets tougher and they end up averaging a ton of turnovers. So Yang has a pretty high IQ in terms of his actual decision making in those areas. But Of course, not a perfect player, wouldn't be projected to the second round if he wasn't, but he's not that quick, right? Defensively, and it's one of the things that plague a lot of big men coming into the league as they enter. In the NBA, you just get abused out there in the pick and roll. They stretch you out. Everyone can shoot in the league now, so it's tough to stay on the court if you don't have that lateral quickness. So that would be an area where he certainly needs to improve. He blocks shots. He blocks his shots, but in the NBA, there's questioning about how that will translate. He does have inconsistent shooting from range, but I think it's honestly a positive that he's even shooting that at his age and, his position. And he struggles imposing his will against weaker competition. So he's not like dominant out there against these different teams. So this is, kind of aggregated reports out there from NBA Draft.net. So interesting guy, a guy that would definitely be exciting, especially as a second round pick. Definitely a player where the Raptors have been in need of a backup big man. We'll see how Oler Champche develops. He's on a two-way contract for next season. Dealt with some injuries in the back half of last year, but did show some upside. But depending on how this roster looks, depending if we draft Kalman Malawach in the first round, it's a player that I would definitely take a serious look at with their second round pick. But he's not the only international prospect that Masai Ujiri is, looked at. Another guy is, on the other end of the spectrum in terms of play style, and that is Nolan Traore. And I hope I pronounced that correctly. Get my French, noise out there. And right now, in terms of NBA Tankathon, he's projected to go 26. I have seen him mocked a lot of different places, a lot of different areas in terms of where he could get drafted. So take a look at who he is as a basketball player. Essentially, 6'3", 175 pounds, from France. Only 19 years old, so you're younger than Yang, but a guy that I think, you watch his highlights, you look at what he's able to do out there on the court, is an exciting basketball player. So in terms of his international stats last year, 12 points per game, 5 assists, 1.9 rebounds, shot 71% from the free throw line, and 31% from three. So solid stats, nothing crazy eye-popping, but only 22 minutes per night out there. The international, the European stats are generally a little bit deflated. So those were his numbers. But, in terms of what he's looking like, in terms of the scouts and what they're sort of judging his game as, he's an elite playmaker. Coming off, when you're running the PG out there, these international teams, you have to be able to facilitate. You have to be able to put people in the right places. And he has that ability out there at that point guard spot. He has great size for a lead guard. He's a shifty ball handler with pace control and his strong defensive instincts and transition presence. So he's a guy that's a good athlete. He can play defense. He has the intangibles athletically, and I've seen some comparisons which might not excite some people. And again, it's a lot of hey, he's from the same place, so you get the same comparables. But I've seen a Killian Hayes, who is a player that had a ton of upside, didn't end up coming to fruition out there in the NBA, but definitely a guy that has the ball handling, has the ability, the playmaking, and can just really have that potential to develop into a lead guard. So, very interesting there. He does need to improve his consistency as a three-point shooter. We saw that in his three-point shooting percentages and things like that. Lacks strength, so finishing through contact. So while he does have that athleticism, needs that body control, that strength to take those hits, to take those bumps, and finish around the rim. Of course, that gets exacerbated when you're playing against grown men out there in Europe, so that is one thing to take into account. He struggles creating in isolation, so he's not going to be one of those guards that is Damian Lillard-esque, creating those buckets, creating those shots for himself. And even though he is a strong playmaker, he can force risky passes, which leads to turnovers. Of course, that is something that's pretty common for young point guards, and once they play, they get used to their speed, they get used to the speed of the game, they can fall into that form. So very interesting guys being worked out for the Toronto Raptors. There's a list of guys that have been brought in and reportedly working out for this team, but a couple players I think have gotten the most buzz and probably the most interesting to a lot of Raptors fans, and we'll cover it all here on Raptors Digest, so make sure you guys hit that subscribe button if you don't want to miss a single thing that's going on with this team. Anyways, you guys have the best night this far. I'm signing out. Cheers.